in the summer of 1959, in the midst of a short but a generous northern summer, in the north of the Irkutsk region, three bosom friends, Ivan Zalogin, Sergei Brovkin, and Denis Mukin, gathered in another sortie. Formerly, they were going hunting, but in their home village, the wolves knew everything. Guns and gear were just a cover. The main purpose of the Trinity was to search for gold, which is rumored, since pre-revolutionary times, could be found in the depths and riverbeds of northern rivers. These searches, of course, did not have official permission, but no one in the village caught their hand. What is characteristic? Catching wasn't going to. Officially, everything looked like a regular fishery, but in fact, gold freestyle. Almost poaching only in relation to the bowels. But the region was so huge, young, and wild. What even if the authorities wanted to sit down in class, doing this would be extremely difficult. The three secured the reputation of experienced taujniki, who could disappear for months, showing up in the village just to restock. On the way, they went out early in the morning of July 17th light. But with carefully selected equipment, were moving north towards the descendant highlands, which they knew almost like their 5 fingers. Will later become known that in those parts they had a few secret bundles. Small hunting and search huts, scattered in hard-to-reach places. These shelters were built for all occasions. They could hide from the weather, wait out danger, and even overwinter, if fate throws in the taiga longer than planned. Going through a few hours, hunters made it to Kogor Creek. Narrow and cold Taoic arteries, looping through breakups and eventually merging with the Great Lena River. The water was icy, but the men accustomed to severe campaigns crossed her into the ford, barely lingering, and began to climb the mountain. Here, the landscape was getting harsher. Individual peaks rose above 1.5 kilometers above sea level, and between them lay a network of tangled gorges, so numerous and winding that on a detailed map they would resemble a complex maze. A few kilometers from the top of the ridge, Renat Kapizash started to change, forest thinned, giving way to covered persistent, as if eternal thickets of curved pines and shrubs. Human foot rarely stepped here. Even the Yakuts, who lived in these places from time immemorial, bypassed some areas side. According to their ancient beliefs, these mountains were inhabited by evil spirits, landkeepers, who brutally dealt with each who dared to disturb their peace. Was considered that such spirits could lead a traveler into impassable wilds, drive him crazy with strange visions, or take his life altogether. But Login, Brovkin, and Mukin did not believe in local legends about evil spirits. For them, all these horror stories about the Yakut guardian spirits were only empty tales, with which old men scared children so that they do not go far into the mountains. They were only interested in one: scout the hill, where is rumored could be a rich gold layer, not yet touched by prospectors. Neither geologists. For this purpose, they went deep into the wild gorge, which, if you believe the stories of seasoned hunters and guards, stretched north so far that its stone, the walls seemed to rest on the Arctic Ocean itself. At first, the gorge was narrow, like a tight hallway, but as it progressed, it gradually expanded. But the sun never got to his bottom: high steep walls of dark red stone, and mountain ranges hanging over them on both sides, closed almost the entire sky. West Gorge wall was smooth, like the hand of a master, and cast crimson faint light, breaking through the narrow gap at the top. East was littered with kurumnik, chaotic piles of stone blocks, which in places formed steep slopes, resting on a rock in these rubble, according to rumors, and could hide the same, not yet discovered by geologists, gold mine. Although there were still a few hours left until the evening, at the end of the gorge stood darkness, so thick that it seemed as if the sun had long since set over the horizon, and suddenly logged in, walking ahead, abruptly stopped. Something strange caught his attention. In the furthest and darkest corner of the gorge flashed incomprehensible lights. He pointed his hand silently, and soon they were noticed, and Brovkin with a fly. The lights moved along the bottom of the gorge smoothly, but with a clearly tangible purpose. That was weird. People should not be here. to the nearest housing tens of kilometers, and the terrain is so deaf that here and the beast then comes rarely. For a natural phenomenon, these lights move too orderly, as if they were not carried by wind or water. And someone was holding them in their hands. Zalogin quickly took the binoculars off his shoulder and began to consider what was happening. Picture opened into the lens. Made him frown. There were really people walking down the gorge. He counted at least 6 figures. Everyone had a lantern in their hands, shining a narrow and bright white beam. But even stranger was their appearance. They all had the same gray overalls on, in appearance something resembling sports, or workers and something bulky on their heads. With first look, you might have thought, what are those fur earplugs? Worn right on top of hoods. But the shape of these caps seemed too correct and unnatural. And the size is disproportionately large compared to the body. Hunters lurking behind a large boulder. Looked over. Trinity silently understood. I just saw something out of the ordinary. But despite the disturbing feelings, excitement and curiosity outweighed fear. Zalogin first broke the silence, suggesting carefully come closer and try to see better strangers. They looked too strange. Yes, their presence in this deaf gorge did not mess with the usual logic. Decision was made quickly. Moving slowly and as silently as possible, they started making their way from stone to stone, from bush to bush, every time withering when one of the gray overalls stopped or turned in their direction. Luck accompanied them only partly. After half an hour of strenuous traffic, managed to get about 100 meters, but going completely unnoticed failed. Was obvious that strangers noticed their presence. From time to time, one of them was showing his hand towards the hunters, talked with neighbors, and returned to his studies again. What exactly were they doing? At first it was not clear. Figures were leaning. Something was searched out between the stones and rolled large blocks and found put in small containers, who held on straps behind their backs. The light of lanterns snatched individual details from the darkness. But until hunters could understand what exactly goes into those containers, and only when eyes are used to the play of light and shadow, yes, and the distance got smaller, Logan with the rest was finally able to review them. Heads then, what did he see? Made his heart squeeze unpleasantly. The strangers' heads were disproportionately large, 2 times more human, and a strange, elongated shape, with wide cheekbones and perfectly smooth skin without hair. Eyes struck especially huge. Dark convex. They seemed to merge with the skin of the face. At the same time, narrow vertical pupils were visible inside, like a snake or a predatory insect. Neither the nose nor the usual mouth did the hunters notice. A small round hole gaped in the place of the mouth, similar to Dahaltzi in sea animals. At first, Zalogin decided, what are those, some fancy masks? Possible for protection against cold or dust. But it was worth a look through binoculars, as doubts dissipated. Facial expressions, barely noticeable movements of the eyes and skin gave out alive. Organic, these were their real faces. Body at creatures. Didn't match human proportions either. Arms are unusually long, almost to my knees. Brushes are narrow with thin fingers. The legs seemed the opposite, too short and slightly bent, which gave the gait springiness and a kind of predatory grace. And suddenly at the very end of the gorge, in that side, where did strange creatures lead their containers? Blazed soft golden glow. At first it looked like a glimpse of the setting sun, but it got brighter too fast, like someone turned on a giant spotlight. Or deep into the gorge entered the composition, with dazzlingly glowing wagons. The light of roses filled the whole space, ran glare through the stones, and it flickered strange silhouettes, from which something cold and alien blown. At this point, the 3 hunters' chests shrunk. Ancient instinctive fear prompted that they ended up together, where a person better not step. First wish was, drop everything and immediately run away from the gorge. Before it's too late, between sheer cliffs, like stuck in a stone trap, stood a colossal cylinder, smooth metal. Height not less than 50 meters and diameter about 20. Its surface glittered in the faint light of flashlights. Strange creatures, but a moment later a bizarre, glowing mosaic, as if folded from 1,000 tiny iridescent plates, which moved, changing patterns. The light then shimmered with gold and emerald, then suddenly went into deep blue and purple tones, as if the surface came alive and breathed. Creatures that, moments ago, we were digging among the stones at the bottom of the gorge, synchronously stopped, seemed their huge eyes flashed the reflection of that strange light. Dropping out of his classes, they almost run, but surprisingly, smoothly rushed to the cylinder, forming a living ring around it. The gorge became unusually quiet. Even the usual mountain rustle disappeared, and only from the depths came an even low hum, from which the stones trembled under the feet of hunters. Shocked, 3 village men looked over. None of them understood. What exactly is going on here? What design is this? And who are these strange inhabitants of the gorge? Zaligan whispered out of